Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story, how I stood up to my micromanaging manager and walked away victorious. The second story, boss faces instant and long-term karma. The third story, the boss who couldn't save enough money to pay me lost his license to run his company. The first story is, this was the tale of how I ruined my boss and stripped him of his bonus. I quit my job as a grocery stocker at a health food store during a summer in college because my manager was a complete F-waffle. His name was Jeremiah, and he was your typical grocery store manager, but a tad worse. Years of running the store had stripped him of his happiness, rendering him into a micromanaging, petty, snobbish a-hole. But I could live with that. He is, after all, managing people who care little about their job. What made it unbearable was that he was utterly infatuated and obsessed with metrics. This meant he would attempt to maximize output from each worker by staffing the store as minimally as possible, and then slave drive us. Because if he could keep the store to standard with 3 less than the recommended or something like that, he got a bonus check. While this might work for, say, a few days when times were rough, it was a near constant. There was always an excuse, and I got wise to it quickly. The store was always understaffed, even though he had an effing stack of resumes on his desk. The store was always close to losing profits and shutting down, even though people were always in the grocery store in good numbers, even before closing. If his paranoid delusions were to be believed, we were all terrible, stupid, and lazy, and everything was about to collapse. He then had the audacity to wonder why the average employee lasted around 2 months, if that. Things began well, but within the first month, Jeremiah and I had already become cross. Apparently, I was a problem employee. Of course, Jim, the energy drink, possibly speed-using coworker of mine, was a stellar employee. See how quickly he faces, even though he's sometimes 15 minutes late? The manager would say, proudly standing before him, displaying him to me like a prized working draft horse. See, this store had an obsession with facing. Everything had to look perfect at all times. This would be a problem if things were staffed accordingly. Our store was not. Everybody was running around doing their work and making sure that the store looked perfect. He had literally pulled me into his office one day to tell me that my poor performance was getting me a reduction in hours until I could shape up. My brother, who still works at a grocery store, told me they do that, but it's just a hidden secret, never blatantly revealed to employees. They just do it on the next schedule. It's never explicitly told to you. They gradually spin you down until you quit. I protested, but unsurprisingly, they fell on deaf ears. He didn't care that I was worked to the bone. He could care less about all the customer demands. He expected me to be able to stock grocery and face it at least 2 to 3 times every 8 hours, all while pleasing every customer. And he was more than happy to find replacements for those who couldn't make the cut doing something so easy. What a load of malarkey. I was paid $9.25 an hour for my work. This was not some job of honor or even pride. I laughed at this foolish man and his lofty ideals of the positions of which he was the master of. He and I knew that the day I quit, he would find somebody who was more capable of facing and stocking their grocery area while dealing with entitled customers. I knew the moment he said that quote that I was worth nothing to him. I was at that stage where I was angry but powerless, so I did the only thing I could. I kept fantasizing about quitting and having an I quit scene a la Office Space, where I give him the finger and leave. Oh, how many times I fantasized. How many times I muttered profanities under my breath, as though I were Helga Pataki, musing about Arnold behind a stack of promotional items or another aisle of groceries. So I continued my gradual slide towards being unemployed, unable to meet ridiculous demands. But one day the goddess Fate herself poked me in the back and whispered into my ears a little temptation that I soon found to be to my liking, perhaps even, well, irresistible. The manager came up to me and advised me that my work partner would not be showing up. He was sick, and that the dairy stocker had not shown up also sick, and that now I would need to do grocery, dairy, and frozen foods. We were now 3 down. This was my time to perform big. The district manager is coming tomorrow, he said. This could be your day to really make an impression. He walked away. Initially, I thought this would be my chance to get a 40-hour work week, so I began my shift with a diligent, determined vigor that wore off quickly. About 4 hours into what was an 8-hour shift, I realized I was horribly behind. The evening rush requests had set me back greatly, and there was no way I could please the manager. I hadn't even finished a single round of facing and restocking. I stood at my U-boat full of boxes with a forlorn look, grasping that stupid cart like a weary traveler supporting his body with his walking stick. There was no winning this game. I was angry. I couldn't win. Why could I not win? Then why play, I asked myself. You go back to school in a month anyway, and with that your work-study job comes back. I got the email and was ready to go. I was gonna quit anyway. It's already in the bag. Quitting today was what, a $400 dent in lost money? So what? I had a few grand in the account. Yes, I thought my cushy computer lab job. Air conditioning, peace, quiet, and studying at work. Paradise. And so I grew a devilish smile that became a face of absolution and determination. I took off my apron and left it on the manager's desk. He was in the back doing an inventory check. At first, I was sad. I wanted to give him a piece of my mind. One final hurrah before I left. Oh well, he would punish himself with his foolishness. Nobody would come in at 8:30 on a Friday night when they had the day off. I folded everything neatly and clocked out. I had no desire to explain my decision, needed no toothless threats from him, no vain attempts to stop me. Not one employee even said anything to me. I was done. I got into my car and drove home. I laughed like a maniac all the way. I was free. He called 14 times and left 6 voicemails. One of the last voicemails was a frantic one with a professional rant about how I had inconsequentially effed him on a business night. F him, I thought. He had taken too many support beams out of the scaffolding and the whole thing had fallen on him, if only for just one night. I never responded and went drinking with friends that night, mocking him in the bars by replaying the last voicemail. Ah, the age-old story of the boss who believes he's the king of the grocery aisle, but in reality he's just a puppet for fate. Jeremiah, the micromanager of the health food kingdom, is obsessed with metrics and turns the store into a circus through his attention to detail. Who determines success based on product displays? Comparable to evaluating a fish based on its ability to climb trees. The stalker turned superstar who's our hero is able to see through Jeremiah's antics in the same way that a vegan can see through bacon. In spite of the absurd demands and low pay, you refused to comply with the twisted rules that the boss had established. I applaud you. When fate finally whispered in your ear, offering you the ultimate temptation, a chance to stick it to the man, you dropped the mic and danced out the door like a boss. You were absolutely ecstatic. Regardless of whether or not Jeremiah blew up your phone like a desperate ex, who cares? Because you were too preoccupied with celebrating your newly acquired freedom with your friends and taking pleasure in his frantic voicemails. Perfectly. The second story is, instant and long-term karma fell on my boss. This one happened about 15 years ago, right after I separated from the military, but I still get a chuckle out of it because I got both instant and long-lasting karma out of it. Knowing that I had just gotten out of the military, my uncle asked if I wouldn't mind helping out a friend of his by working as a security officer / gate guard for his security company as a favor to my uncle. Of course, I oblige and go to work shortly thereafter. The first time I see the guy after being hired left me with the impression that the guy likes to live the high life, so he must be doing well. Driving a BMW, lots of jewelry, etc. Looking back, it should have raised alarms in my mind. The 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week didn't bother me. Prior service. So I'm used to it. The first instance of problems was the first check I received 3 weeks later. He held back a week when it bounced. Trying to give the guy the benefit of the doubt, I called him and he stated that surely it had to be a banking error and to try it again tomorrow. Since it was a Saturday, I had to wait until after work on Monday. Sure enough, the second time it went through, so I just brushed it off as coincidence. The next paycheck rolls around and the same thing happens. I call the guy up again and he claims bank problems again. Tells me to do the same thing again and it should work. I say okay, and then after I hang up with him, I call my uncle. After I explain the situation to my uncle, he tells me to handle it the same way again this time, but if it happens the next time, to call him before I call my employer. I say okay, leave it at that and follow the process, and it worked again. Third payday rolls around and I receive a paycheck, but it's only half of what I normally get. When I question the guy, he says that not enough taxes were taken out of the previous 2 checks, and he's having to make up for them. I'm getting a little miffed at this point, but needing cash, I let it go and try to cash my check. And guess what? Even that one at half the amount bounces. We're talking like a $300 check here, so it should easily be covered. I immediately call my uncle, who I've neglected to mention at this point is a police officer in a different city, and explain to him the entire situation. He lets me know that I'm not to return to the job, and to call the guy the next morning explaining that I will not return until cash for the full amount of my regular pay is brought to me in person. He, of course, tried to lay blame for this at my feet somehow, saying that it was me trying to blackmail and threaten him, and he wouldn't stand for it, that he was recording the conversation. My wife could be heard in the background raising a royal fuss. I told him to do what he felt he needed to do and that I was ending the call. My next call was to the district attorney's office, who my uncle had called to give them a heads up that I might be calling. Not even 2 hours later, the guy is calling me saying we can work something out if I'll only come to the guard post to relieve the guy who had been there for the past 14 hours. Come to find out, that employee had just quit because of the same situation happening to him, and boss was having to fill his post for that shift, and now for my 12-hour shift as he was already stretched thin staff-wise. My response to him was, the district attorney has advised me not to have any further contact with you, and that I'm to report any further attempts to contact by you to him directly. There was silence, and then the guy yells, "You did what? I'll bury you." I simply told him that the conversation was being recorded, and that the threat would also be turned over to the DA's office, and then I hung up the phone. After calling the DA's office back and relaying what had just occurred, I called the workers' rights office of the unemployment office and filed a complaint against the guy. Unpaid hours over 40 hours without being a salaried employee, lack of proper meal relief, etc. Needless to say, short-term karma, he got stuck working 24-hour shifts by himself without any relief. Long-term karma, he was charged by the DA, he was charged by the workers' rights office, and he lost his state license to operate a security company in the state and those surrounding. Boss, who couldn't keep enough money to pay me, losing his license to run his company. Here we have a boss who's more slippery than a buttered eel, trying to pull the wool over our hero's eyes with bounced checks and half payments. But he had no idea that our hero wasn't just any security guard. He was a veteran with family ties and a direct line to the district attorney's office. First, the boss tries to say that the bounced checks were caused by mistakes at the bank, which is like a magician pulling rabbits out of a hat. Our hero, though, sees through the lies and calls in help from Uncle Cop and the powerful DA. And when the boss threatens to bury our hero, he responds with a coolness that would make James Bond proud, recording the threat for posterity and serving up a dish of poetic justice hotter than a habanero pepper. The boss's plan fails in the end. He's left to deal with the mess he's made while the law comes knocking on his door and takes away his license to run his security empire. The third story is, woman tries to steal our table at restaurant while we're eating. My husband, myself, and our almost 2-year-old were eating breakfast at a very small mom-and-pop diner that had 8 tables and 2 waitresses. My husband and I were done eating and had paid the bill. My little toddler was of course taking her sweet time and still eating, and we were contentedly sipping our coffees. A rush of people started coming in the door, and their wait times gradually increasing with each new table added to the wait list. People waited outside on this day, and the waitresses offered them cups of coffee while they waited. A woman entered and said, "I'll sit here," and gestured to our table. The waitress said, "There are other people ahead of you." The woman argued back, "What people? Where are they?" And the waitress said they might be walking outside. "Can I offer you a cup of coffee to take outside?" And the entitled woman responded, "You can put the cup of coffee at this table," again gesturing to our table that we're still occupying. This continued on before finally the woman agreed to be added to the wait list. It was so annoying. I felt bad for the busy waitress to have to deal with her on top of trying to do the rest of her job. Oh, the Olympics of entitlement, where everyone receives a gold medal for their audacity. At that diner, this self-centered woman attempted to pull a fast one on the waitress, but she was not going to play along with her. You deserve praise for maintaining your composure in the midst of the entitled chaos. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.